What's the most awkward situation you've ever been in? Was unexpectedly in the car ride with my boyfriend's parents on their way to sign their divorce papers. When I was a kid, we were on holiday and decided to go to a church. While we were there, I decided that I would be funny if I would slap my dad's ass with both hands. So I ran in full speed to maximize the impact of the slap. I ended up slapping a stranger who also happened to walk next to a woman with a stroller in his hands, which made me think it was my dad. It was even worse that my parents saw it as well. Edit. Because people are asking what happened afterwards. My parents just laughed at me, which made the guy laugh as well, and then we just left the church, I think. One time in college, I snuck into my RA's room and hid under the blanket on his top bunk. My goal was to scare him when he came in and settle down a bit. He ended up coming in with his girlfriend and began making out with her. After a good lifetime couple moments, I jumped up and ran out. No saving it. I was sitting in class and the kid next to me farted and I said "God bless you" as if it were a sneeze. Not awkward for me, but I was the reason for it. I served for a couple of years and worked multiple restaurants in that time frame. I worked at a Denny's, night shift, best and worst job for many reasons. Anyways, there was a regular that came in often, drunk as a skunk and nasty as hell. He tipped really well but was so nasty to us girls. It never fazed me, so I served him often. He offered many times to pay for extra service and tried to get me to leave with him often. Of course I never did, but a couple months later I'm working a new place little more high and I worked mornings here. And this was a Sunday morning church rush. Guess who was sat in my section? My nasty regular from my last job with his entire family. His wife, kids, parents, the whole group, fresh out of church. The look on this man's face when I walked up and said hello. He was red as a fire truck, and I made it worse by asking if he remembered me. He left me a huge tip, probably because I didn't bring up his nasty mouth and grabby hands from his late drunken nights. Edit. I was a waitress. That's what I meant by serving. Okay, I already posted in this thread, but I remembered something even worse. When I was in 2nd grade, my brother and I would always be picked up after school by my dad. We had a green van with a red stripe on the side. So my brother grabs my hand and storms us up to the car. He rips open the door, sits us down, buckles me in, and then says, "Can we get McDonald's on the way home?" We both look up and there is 2 middle-aged adults sitting in the front seat that are obviously not our family. They stare at us, we stare at them. In my little brain we've been staring at each other for at least 10 minutes at this point. My brother unbuckles me, unbuckles himself. We get out and walk away. No words were exchanged. We then checked who was in the car before getting in from that point forward. Edit. I've been on Reddit for 6 years and this is my highest comment by far. Thank you so much for the gold and silver. You're all so nice. I've loved hearing your similar stories. I'm going to ask my brother if he remembers this. Lol. I was a teenager with a boner. Pretty standard so far. I walked downstairs and had to tuck it in my pajamas so the head is sticking straight up and the erection is pinned against the body so the boner isn't noticeable. Well, when I put my t-shirt on it fell behind the tip, so if you looked at my wasset line you could clearly see the tip of my bennies. I was talking to my mom for a few minutes and she was flushed red in the face and quickly trying to kill conversation, not something my mom is known for. I walked away, saw what was going on and didn't know what the hell to do. We never discussed it, but because things were so awkward at dinner, I'm pretty sure my mom knew that I realized it happened as well. When I was a kid I hugged a random dude because I thought it was my dad. Even better how this dude's son was standing next to him. This poor girl walked into my lecture by mistake about halfway through. This particular professor really enjoys talking to all of his students and was super engaging even with 400+ students in his class. When the girl walked in, my professor stopped teaching, looked at the girl and asked if she was in the class. She said she was and began walking towards the front where the open seats were. This is a fairly large lecture hall and all 200 students, approximately how many actually show up to class, were now forced to watch this poor girl walk towards a seat because the professor didn't continue talking and just stared at her. She got close to the front and I think the pressure of the whole room got to her and she said, "Actually no, why not?" and turned around and we all had to watch this poor girl climb back up the stairs and out of the hall. I was literally watching my worst nightmare. When I was a kid my family van broke down so we all had to squeeze into my dad's car to go to a funeral. Anyways, my older sister had to sit on my lap. Yep, You guessed it. I got a boner and she freaked out and started screaming. My 79-year-old mother-in-law with Alzheimer telling us that she had sex the previous night with another resident of her nursing home. She had been celibate for 20 years up until then. We think. I was at a funeral for one of my husband's relatives. On my way in, an employee of the funeral home asked me when I was due. I wasn't pregnant, but I'm fat and was wearing an Empire waistcoat, so I wasn't offended. As I signed the guest book, I corrected her and tried to defuse the situation with a joke about burning that coat later, but she just wouldn't stop. She kept trying to apologize and explain herself, and I just wanted to run away. Then I was stuck in a small room with her for the next 2 hours. I was looking at my mom's phone cause she wanted to show me some pictures from what she did that weekend. I swiped one too many times and came across one of her nudes. I felt my soul jolt out of my body seeing that sit. I was riding in the passenger seat with my mom, who has always been strict and very tight-knit several years ago, when for some reason she decided to completely open up to me about all of her drug experimentation and sexual exploits in the 60s, and the time she did cocaine with Steve Jobs at a fancy restaurant in the 80s. It was a very uncomfortable eye-opener and I was trapped listening to it. Last summer my wife and I were browsing for random crap in Pier 1. I wandering around the store aimlessly and see my wife kneeling down inspecting some merchandise on the bottom shelf. I approach her from behind, slightly tap the top of her head, and go boop. It was not my wife, just someone who looked almost exactly like her from the back. She looks up at me. All I managed to say was, "Oh, I thought I was married to you. Sorry." Okay, so me and some friends were at a restaurant and a buddy of mine was telling us about this new girl he just started going out with a few days back. Well, another friend started telling us about this girl that he banged the previous night. The conversation went on for a minute and finally somebody asked for the name of the girl that he had banged, and it turns out it was a girl that the other friend had started dating a few days earlier. Q narrowly avoided fight as we convinced him it's better to find out she's city now rather than later. The two guys still no longer speak though. My best friend waiting to tell her parents that she's gay until when I was over for dinner. Most George Costanza moment of my life. I was flying back home from a business trip in GA. Before we all got on the airplane, everyone noticed that we would be flying with 3 military K9s and their handlers. All good. Point being, everyone noticed them, and if they hadn't, the pilot was kind enough to point them out when he came over the intercom to give his spiel. A round of applause for our service members and their brave working dogs was given. Hours later in the flight crew had turned off the lights. I needed to take a piss, and moved forward in the cabin toward the restrooms. Well, one of the dogs was black and I didn't see his paw sticking into the aisle. It was made so much worse by the fact that I am a veteran, and I love dogs. I am the son of a veteran who was a K9 handler when he served, but how the heck am I going to explain that to a plane load of people giving me the stink eye for being the asshole who stepped on the dog? George, it was a black dog. Jerry, and the lights were out. George, the lights were out. Jerry. I walked in on my roommate in senior year of college banging his girlfriend. We had a rule about a hat on the door if we wanted privacy. There was no hat when I came back one morning and I got a full, eye-level, side view of him and her mid-thrust because he had the top bunk. They kind of laughed it off but was pretty awkward for me. A gentleman was outside the hotel smoking in his holy, it's wordplay, jogging pants. I really wanted to tell him his balls were showing, but I couldn't summon the courage to do it. He wanted to chat about Magic the Gathering. I used to run a restaurant and had inherited an employee with a slew of mental health issues. She had massive anxiety issues and just couldn't handle the pressure of working in a restaurant. She'd break down and cry over simple mistakes if she felt she was making too many. It was extremely unfortunate, but I was terribly underprepared to coach someone like that. One day, during downtime, the cooks were shooting the sit and recounting stories of weird ex-co-workers. I opened up my yap and said, "Who was the one who kept crying every time they'd screw up?" She was 2 feet away and literally responded with me, "Oh, are you two dating?" He said yes. At the same time I said no, to which his friend told you didn't ask clearly enough. Edit: I accidentally mixed up him saying yes and me saying no. I did community service with a youth group when I was around 10-11. Around the Christmas holiday, we bought and wrapped a bunch of gifts to take to an old folks' home. I pick up a gift and walk over to this elderly gentleman. I swelling with pride and eager to drink in the large glass of thank yous I about to be served. He opens a really nice pair of slippers and looks at them for a moment. What the hell am I supposed to do with these? You put them on your feet, I delightfully exclaim. I haven't had feet since Vietnam. Edit. Whoa, this comment blew up. Thanks for the gold, kind stranger. My highest rated comment is about a guy with no feet. Every other edit trope. Edit 2. The first edit is satire. Based on the comments below, it was a poor attempt.